All right, Shalom. I'm gonna start out by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem Rakakwadash, double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom to all the Akim out there pushing the word of sincerity and in truth. It's brother Bars off from Great Millstone, Atlanta, and just got a lesson here going into the origins of this sport. Basically going into basically the background history of basically bull running. It's also known as what if I'm not mistaken, matador. Matador is basically another word for bull. So it's a heavily celebrated sport, and it has deep demonic origins. And it really goes back to Jake, and I'm gonna go into it. I'm gonna read it. And basically expound it. It says revising history, the running of the bulls. The history of the running of the bulls has direct historical implications to the Europeans' removal of the Moors from their land. The Moors had conquered Spain, and Spain flourished with wealth, trade, culture, education, science, philosophy, etc. So the famous bull runs that are known in Europe really goes back to when Esau was running the Moors, which were Israelites that basically was following basically Islam. Yeah, the Moors were Israelites that was into the Muslim religion. They got pushed out of Spain and various other places, and they actually celebrated this sport to this day. And even when you go back to really all these sports will really go back to us either being in harsh captivity, or us being pushed out of certain lands, such as football, basketball. Those go back to the Roman Colosseums, which Jake was all throughout those Colosseums, basically, killing and destroying one another. You watch those certain movies and shows such as Spartacus, and it'll show you how Jake was forced in those Colosseums, and they had to fight a number of fights in order to be freed from the Colosseums. And the individuals that was surrounding them were basically in the crowd. Were looking at it all through joy and entertainment, but the ones in the middle arena were fighting for their lives. So even, like I said, the sports, hell, a lot of these streets, they have demonic history. A lot of these, museums and all these different things, their origins are very, very deep and dark. And it really goes back to the Edomite rule. When the so-called white man got into power, he basically started to rearrange the dynamics of life and change culture, change education, change science, change sport, change philosophy, all these different things. And as when he got in power, he actually celebrated. That's why in 70 AD, when we got pushed out of Rome, they established the Ark of Titus. So, this so-called white man, he's known through celebrations when taking down us as a people. Through these different quarters, whether it's in Rome, whether it's in Spain, whether when we got taken down in West Africa, when the Native Americans got taken down, you have Columbus Day. When America won their independence and we were extreme slaves, you have the 4th of July. Amongst many others, all these holidays, so-called high holy days and high festivities, all are commemorations of us basically falling and being destroyed as a people. So when the Europeans conquered Spain and removed the Moors from power, the tradition of the running of the bulls became a popular propaganda tool used to promote the European agenda and to commemorate the removal of black bulls, aka Moors in parentheses, from the land. So, and this is a highly celebrated sport today. You'll see the big bulls actually chasing down this Spanish individuals, and they're actually, a lot of people actually involved. People throughout the city, you'll see storms of people actually coming to be chased by bulls and different things like that of that nature, in celebration of Jake being taken down. So this whole world is really, in cahoots. It tells you that in Psalms, the 2nd chapter, Psalms, the 83rd chapter, how all these different nations are basically a conglomerate. They all come together as a conglomerate to celebrate the fall of Jake. And it also tells you that in Lamentations, the first chapter, which I have the precept. And this is another article, just to back it up. You know, it says the running of the bulls is celebrated every year, but people don't like to talk about its anti-black and Islamophobic history. All right, and this is under Afropunk.com. I'm just gonna basically hit the point. The famous running of the bulls in Pamplona, Spain, is the same tradition, and there are matter of fact. Let me read this. The Fetes de Bayonne, the party of Bayonne, takes place from July 26th to July 31st this year in the city of Bayonne, France. It is a unique celebration of the cultural milieu that is southern France and Basque country, which spreads down to Spain and has fought for its recognition as a separate people, independent of French dominion for hundreds of years. The famous running of the bulls in Pamplona, Spain, is of the same tradition, and there are several running of the bulls throughout the rest of Spain, Portugal, and even in Latin American countries. Right. So the Latin Americans, when they were taken down by the Spanish and the Portuguese, they actually forced the same traditions onto the Latins. All right, and you have these stupid ass Latinos that don't do research to save their life, that's actually celebrating these historical things. That's why a majority you Latinos are in Roman Catholicism, man. Because you haven't did your due studies and really research how when the so-called Spanish and Portuguese took you down, how they forced Catholicism, Christianity, and these different religions on our people, and gave you Saint Maria to worship, Jesus Christos, when the white Jesus, all right, AKA, the white meat, white sweet Jesus, and they truly haven't did their research to even know that the Lord is a so-called black man, and know the celebrations and the people that they actually worship in the streets, and even to the very fiber of the clothing that they're actually putting on high goes back to the breaking down and the destruction of the people. All right, and that's the same thing with you Negroes too. The tradition of bullfighting, which has recently been reconsidering its inhumane murdering of bulls for spectacle, can even be traced back to 2000 BCE in ancient Rome. However, part of the tradition's history is often left out. The running of the bulls is also symbolic of the anti-black and Islamophobic expulsion of the Moors from medieval Europe. Right, so, that was just the main point, just to back it up with another article. If brothers want to go into it and, get the chance, of course, do so. But that's just the main point I wanted to hit. And it's all biblical prophecy, and I'm going to start with this scripture. That's all Bible prophecy of us falling as a nation. That was the curses that we had to suffer from deviating and following the path of wickedness. The Lord gave us commandments not to worship idols of wood and stone, and our people did so, following Islam and other false religions, and that was the result of that. Not cooperating with the Spirit of the Lord got us pushed out of certain lands where we were ruling and conquering, and subjugated us and pushed us in slavery, and forced us to go into slavery. So this is Deuteronomy 28 and 25. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and that's what happened with the war of the Moors against the so-called Europeans, which are Edomites, the so-called white men. They went against them one way, and it says, and flee 7 ways before them, and they fled, and that's where you have this celebration to this day, which is Bible prophecy. You got these guys trying to say that the Bible is a make-believe book. But the history matches up with the prophecy of what will happen to us as a nation in these different lands, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. So when we got pushed out, such as in 70 AD, this is particularly talking about 70 AD, we got pushed to certain parts of Africa. When the Moors got pushed, they got pushed out. Israelites in West Africa, they got pushed. They would, like as the prophecy says, thrown as a ball to a strange country, and we were left there to die. Now we got pushed to Asia, we got pushed to these different transatlantic routes, and that's all prophecy coming to pass. All right, fulfilling itself. All right, And best believe it's going to be a retribution or a payback. The so-called white man did all these things to us, and all the sports and celebrations is basically mockery against the blacks and Hispanics. Guess what? We're going to have celebrations in sports when we take the so-called white man down. And you other nations, you Hamites, we're going to have Hamitic sports. You know, the Hamitic NFL, where you're going to be ramming heads without equipment. You're not gonna be able to have your safety, your basically safety attire on when you all are playing sport. You know, it's gonna be the same thing. The Coliseum ain't going nowhere. All right, it's just gonna be you so-called whites. You all gonna have to suffer the same thing that we suffered. All right, where you're brutally stabbing and destroying one another for so-called gain, for freedom. And guess what? There ain't gonna be no freedom. All right. Because the prophecy speaks about how you devils going to have to suffer for a number of years, and after that you're going to be consumed through a barn fire, through a large barn fire, man. Obadiah the 18th chapter backs that up on down. So read this scripture too. This is Lamentations 1, and I'll start it. The whole book is great. But I'll start at 1. How did the city sit solitary that was full of people? How has she become as a widow? Her represents Israel. Us being solitary means that we got broken down and left to a state of loneliness where we didn't have no, spiritual security. All right, we were sitting in the dust. Whenever you sit down, you're sitting on the ground, meaning you're in a low state. And it says that was full of people. How has she become as a widow? She that was great among the nations and princess among the provinces, how would she become tributary? Another word for tributary is slave. How would us as a great nation, Yashal, the princes of the power, become just tributaries? All right, because we didn't listen to our power, which made us fall from our grandeur, fall from our glory, and basically made us subject and basically the house of slaves. She weepeth sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers she have none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They are become her enemies. And who are our friends? The other nations. All right, it speaks about how the other nations are plucked us. You know, they basically stripped the feathers and stripped the actual life out of us as a people. They destroyed our culture, and they basically rearranged the lands, rearranged our heritage and nationality, and they got it where this history seems so far-fetched to some, man. When these things didn't happen, these things only occurred yesterday, man. So-called white man got into true rulership during the time of the Renaissance. All right, but Jake doesn't know that. Jake think the so-called white man been ruling since the beginning of time. Continuing on. Judah is going into captivity because of affliction and because of great servitude. She dwelleth among the heathen. She findeth no rest. All her persecutors overtook her between the straits. All right, so the other nations, they put us in servitude, and they didn't give us no rest. They ran us out of the lands. And that's why when you go into history too, a lot of times in these different feudal systems, they had a lot of peasants, which a lot of them peasants was Jake. But prior to that, really, Jake had Esau in slavery, because when the Moors were in rulership, they was beating beating the so-called white man down and popping the hell out their women. And that's why when the Europeans came into power, they actually celebrated, because they knew that the Moors and other Israelites were basically did them dirty. So that was a thing of vengeance. But when the so-called white man got us in captivity, they had us basically tilling and farming the lands. And after they got up so far and they didn't need us, what did they do? They killed us off. All right. Same thing in America with a lot of midwives and things of that nature. When Esau established these hospitals and all these different transition different things through the industry of things and stopped dealing with the natural way of living, they killed off a lot of those housewives and things of that nature, man. Started calling them witches, saying that they were useless. All right. And this is all biblical prophecy, but this is the main thing I had for Akim, just to chime in really on this point of the Islamic history of Jake, falling as a people. But guess what? We're gonna rise. We at the bottom right now, but through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shah, we're gonna be raised back up in the right spirit, following the law, statutes, and commandments, and having Yahweh Shah by Shemar Kakwadash at our side. All right, and following these laws, so that these nations will no longer be able to actually have the access to put us in captivity or slavery. So I want to end it by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Shema Shah by Shemar Kakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom.